Good afternoon. Welcome to the 13th edition of the Best Practice Meet. This session is on shipping better, secure software, DevSecOps for modern apps. Just to give the context, the session will open the window to what is DevSecOps and how does it pan out in the era of the cloud. It will also cover facets such as mitigation of third-party risk and how support is offered by the enterprises in the development of DevSecOps. Without further ado, I would like to call upon stage the moderator for the session, Mr. Dilip Panjwani.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Dilip
Hi.
Panjwani, CISO and IT controller at L&T Infotech. Happy to be here.
Welcome, Dilip. I'd now like to call over the panel, starting with Mr. Ashish Ranjan, Head of Security and Compliance at PageApp.
Hi, everyone. Well, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Right. Next, we have Ms. Mini Gupta. She's partner consulting at EY.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good to be a part of this session.
Welcome to the panel. And finally, we have Mr. Durga Prasad, Country CISO and Head of Cybersecurity at HSBC.
Hi all. Good afternoon. Hope you are safe and sound. And thanks for inviting me and feeling good to be here.
Thank you everyone for being a part of the panel. Mr. Dilip, may I request you to share your opening remarks and initiate the panel discussion. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anand. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all the panelists for joining in for this wonderful discussion. The topic, as Anand called out, is related to better and secure software delivery and looking at DevSecOps for the modern applications. Now, what do we mean by this topic? I didn't think it requires much of an introduction. All of us at enterprise levels have applications that we support or we develop for our organization and customers. And as part of that, we also face some practical challenges with regards to business urgency, agility, need for faster shipping and faster delivery. While at the same time, on the other aspect, we see a lot of application-related threats and attacks which are getting more and more predominant today in the market. Application getting compromised because not configured well enough, or the application not coded well enough, and they are not tested and having the right controls before they're taken live. So I think that is one of the main aspects that we want to discuss in today's meeting. At the same time, we've also been seeing a lot of supply chain hacks that are happening, and there are many elements in those also which relate back again to the application configurations as well as application codes. Keeping that as a backdrop, I think we have a wonderful mix of both practitioners and consulting expertise on the table today. And it will be an interesting discussion to understand how we are dealing with these practical challenges and what can we best do in regards to best practices as well as practical controls, which can help us meet the objectives. So with this, I would open the panel for all my colleagues on the panel discussion to give out what do they mean today, or what does shipping better and secure software mean to them. So Mini, you want to take first?
Sure. Thanks, Dilip. Like you rightly said, the context, right? Today, there is a lot of development that's happening, more so with the whole digital, mandate that we have now. And the focus historically has been on quality. The focus historically has been on how do we ensure the defects is low. But more and more, if you see, there is this increased spate of cyber attacks that are happening, and it kind of root causes back to say, okay, the software that actually was used as an infiltration point was probably not coded correctly or was not really built the right, secure way. And hence, it's now all the more imperative to ensure that as we embark on a development journey, as we embark on the whole software development journey, we need to ensure that security is a way of design within the same. It's like what we say, privacy by design, security by design. It has to be ingrained right from the initial stages and not something that you're looking at only pre-release. So definitely when we talk about, shipping a secure software or a product, it's really about ensuring that security is being taken care of through the entire life cycle.
Thanks, Mini. Ashish, you want to go next, please?
Rookie mistake. I didn't unmute myself, but thank you for having me as well over here. I think Mini had kind of mentioned a lot of interesting points, but I think from a product perspective, so I have primarily worked in a space which is more product development led, and we have a vendor. And I think the kind of conversation that I'm having at my level is more around conversations. Hey, how do we get a developer access to, I guess, better security when they're developing the code? How do they get access to features they can release quickly? And how do I make it available in their CI/CD pipeline so they're able to kind of ship new features more frequently? Like at the moment, we're doing deployments 2 to 3 times a day, which is, I think I'm pretty amazed by. Sometimes I still pinch myself, like, is that really a thing? But then you kind of realize the amount of effort that's gone behind it. So I guess that would mean, although I would say not everything is 100% secure, you're still trying to figure out, hey, what's the high risk versus the low risk? But for me, shipping better and secure software means I'm able to push content or push features out much more faster than what I would normally have been, which is traditional waterfall. I remember it used to be like a 1-year project, 6-year project, and you're like, yeah, I think I'll eventually get there, but I kind of find the agile to be much more better approach. So that's what shipping better and secure software means for me.
Thanks, Ashish. I couldn't agree more. In fact, you touched on very critical elements with regards to practical scenarios in today's world for all of us. Durga, why don't you take a stab at it and help us with your perspectives on this topic?
Sure. So for me, shipping better software, the title what rings bells with me is the customer. So I mean, in endpoint, whatever we are making, whatever we are selling, has to be consumed by the customer. So how do we make software which is consumable by the customer and requires custom basic minimum functional requirements for the customer, and with being secure? So first element is how do you make it better, because like what Ashish has alluded to, now the release cadences have improved a lot. Earlier it was in a typical waterfall model, the release cycle would be 1 year, 2 years or so. The product is in still making. We used to show prototypes. Now what customer expects as a prototype is real model, where okay, this is how the screens look like, this is how the functionality workflow looks like. I think the customer expectations are increasing, and we have to catch up with customer expectations to be in this industry. And being in security, we have to meet up to the IT expectations or business expectations.
Definitely. I don't think customers are looking at wireframe screenshots anymore. They are actually looking at touch and feel, just like they would like to see in the physical world. So I don't think that's something that we all on the panel agree upon, definitely. So one question which I wanted to ask all of you guys was, where do you see the elements with regards to DevSecOps, and how do you see shifting left as a paradigm, which is buzzword being spoken very often in all the conferences as well as all the meetings that we keep on getting together on, whether as community or as within our organizations? How do you see this working practically for you as an organization as well as your customers? Would like to hear some thoughts about it from your side.
I was going to say ladies first, but I'm not going to go first. Maybe.
No, go on, Ranjan.
So for me, I have a feedback for some reason, but I'm going to continue talking, I guess. I think for me, the critical element with shifting left has been the adoption of security. And I think it means different things to different people. I run a cloud security podcast over the weekend, and cloud security is all about, hey, use our tool in cloud. We can do DevSecOps, we can do DevOps, we can do security. But I think what they tend to forget is most of the things happening on the left is not in security. It's basically in development land. And that, for me, is a lot more, how do I get my security across to those guys? That's shifting left for me. Now, you can call it DevSecOps, but I guess we were doing it before DevSecOps happened as well. Not that we didn't have application security people back then. But I think for me, shifting left, although a lot of people talk about CI/CD pipeline, have this tool in there, that tool in there, I think it starts from a developer, and I'm sure we'll allude to this later on as well. But for me, it's a cultural element as well, where how many of us can say we have hundreds of security people in a company compared to the number of developers? Usually the ratio is around 1:10. So one security, maybe 1:10 is probably quite excessive, but 1:to like a 50, I would probably say. You have an AppSec person for 50 people sometimes. How is that even practical? So for me, shifting left would mean I'm able to kind of get something to the developer, and if it's in the form of a CI/CD tool integration, maybe that's what it is. But yeah, that's what it means to me.
Thanks, Ashish. Many, you want to take a viewpoint on this?
Sure. So like Ashish mentioned, right, shifting left is really starting off early. Now, how do we ensure that security as a culture or security as a consideration is not something that you bring in later on, but something that's a part of right from the planning stage. And let's be honest, we're far from it, frankly. Yes, clients are thinking about it. Yes, there are some who are even attempting it. But how do we bring it in them to say when we are in that rush of releasing, or when we are in the rush of business priorities, how do we bring in security right at the planning stage so that the later on reversions that we have and the retesting that needs to be done can actually be minimized. So frankly, it is shifting left and also shifting top. We need to also ensure that top down there is that pressure to say, frankly, guys, you will not lose time with security being built in. You're not going to lose time, but probably save on time if it's part of the process early on. And what Ashish alluded towards, not necessarily someone from security is sitting there in the planning stage to do that. It could also be someone who has that bent of mind, who's a part of the DevOps team, who's actually taking that role on. So frankly, we need to start early, but we also need to start from the top.
I like that perspective of that shift left and top. Actually, that top is something which has been kind of implied but never kind of referred across in many of our discussions. But this really brings a fresh air to perspective on practical buy-in from management also, as well as leadership understanding the importance of security in order to support the shift left paradigm. Durga, what about you? What do you say on how does this really work, and how is HSBC looking at this adoption?
Okay. Okay, so I'll take a general approach and maybe take us back a decade ago where we were practitioners at some point. Imagine when we were doing testing or assessment activities in initial days of our careers. So somebody used to give us a piece of code or come to us saying we need a test. We subject it to different scans, different kinds of tests, and give them a report, which the developers or our clients doesn't understand. They come back to us. They schedule a call with us saying, please explain me what does this CRSF mean? What does this XSS mean? So in principle, to me, shift left strategy is empowering. So instead of waiting till the last where the application gets developed, it's in beta stage. Cyber team is brought in to find vulnerabilities, and they don't and the dev teams doesn't understand vulnerabilities. Shift making going towards going more towards our development side, like what he has mentioned. We have to have kind of knowledge. We need to imbibe knowledge in the developers itself, because like what Ashish has mentioned, the developer can be, so per developer, per 50 developers, it could be one security tester, and the bandwidth is not enough, or we always have this resource crunch. So from shift left strategy, according to me, we have to have some sort a measure or a way in which the developers are given tools, processes, and procedures where they invariably the code they check into the system invariably is free or minimal vulnerabilities instead of identifying them right after the development cycle.
Thanks, Durga. So definitely, I think the cultural shift is an important aspect to build upon the DevSecOps as a concept and a process in the organization. It does require a top-down approach to have the management support, so that while we have the business urgencies and the need for agility and quick rollouts, there has to be a clear buy-in also for security as an important element as part of the whole cycle. And eventually, when we are looking at the shift left paradigm, we also have to look at aspects on how we empower and educate our developer community so that they are having a self-service based option, which can really help them with regards to getting the testing done early on. For example, many organizations, including for us, for example, at LTI, we also follow a similar approach, since we are into those services where we provide application development and production support for our customers globally, as well as for the enterprise. So we do kind of work with the developer communities and empower them to perform their scans themselves based on the profiles or configurations developed by us at an InfoSec standpoint. And they have the power to go and test it at will whenever they are ready. They don't have to wait for availability of InfoSec person who might be available possibly 9 to 5, 5 days a week, while they work on weekends. So that aspect really allows them to go faster, get their input directly, and then there's a knowledge base which really helps them out. I think we need to look at many elements how to empower the developer community so that they feel included and not kind of enforced. So another question which comes in when you look at DevSecOps, this perspective when we try to bring in the agility as well as development. Uh, On-premise or in-house application that works good enough and very smooth if you want to have a structured approach. But with the new ways of technologies, the digital era, the cloud as a new forefront for everybody, where since pandemic deployment, I think most of the organizations who were very apprehensive into the cloud space all of a sudden adopted cloud and embraced it fully as if it was never an apprehension at all in the past. So application, serverless code, infrastructure as code, these all have been coming out very big time today. How do you see the DevSecOps in the era of cloud, and what challenges or concerns that worry you as a practitioner or a consultant from your customer perspectives, and how do you propose uh, options to these challenges? So, Durga, why don't you start for this time? Durga? I think there's some issue with the connectivity. So, Ashish, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I can go. For me personally, I think I've been talking about cloud and cloud security for just over 2 years on a podcast. So I think I probably have a two-side perspective to this. One side being, I think a lot of people are confusing DevSecOps with infrastructure security in cloud, which it is not. I think that traditionally when we spoke about DevSecOps, a lot of people talk about the fact that, hey, I would be doing static code analysis, software composition analysis, and doing all that application security, product security things. However, moving into the cloud, and I would say the cloud service providers are to be blamed to some extent for this as well, because they talk about the fact that they can do, say, some kind of DevSecOps at their point, which is, hey, you can integrate into our CI/CD pipeline, but they don't have like a static code analysis tool. They don't have a software composition analysis tool. So a lot of people have thought, hey, DevSecOps actually, for people who are kind of coming in new to the field, and they go into cloud, and the cloud provider tells them, hey, we do DevSecOps. And when you look at it, what they're really doing is infrastructure security. Yes, it's automated. Yes, it's part of the CI/CD pipeline because you have infrastructure as code. But technically, what we kind of wanted to kind of allude to, if we kind of step away from, hey, what really DevSecOps is, we're just trying to automate security. Now, if you're just trying to automate security and come from that perspective into the cloud, you are looking at two things. One is the infrastructure security, which is infrastructure as code. You do some automation over there, have some checks in there for secrets and anything else that you want to do. And you can use existing cloud services for it. Although there is a challenge with if you are someone who's already established in an on-premise world and you're trying to bring over those security products that you used to use before, which sometimes are not compatible in cloud. The other aspect is when you're trying to do product security, which is the application security side. There are no current tools. Well, they do provide vulnerability scanning. They do provide access management, but they're not app product security tools. So the challenges over there are kind of twofolds. When you have a team which is full of developers, they would know application security side if you've kind of done your job in your on-premise. If you haven't, they probably don't even know that. Then you're left with the infrastructure security problem, which none of the developers know how to do. So someone else has to piggyback that on, which is either DevOps team or the security team. So those two, I guess, are buckets where either it's a team challenge where there's not enough skill set because the cloud world was promised with the land that, hey, you can get to production really quickly if you use serverless. But how many people actually are using serverless versus I'm just going to use a virtual machine because it's the easiest transition from my on-premise to cloud. So yeah, those two are the big buckets, which probably are not spoken about enough in cloud and in cloud security world. But I'm keen to know what others have to say as well.
Thanks, Ashish. I think this was a fantastic summarized version on both the aspects that you deal with today. And I think it's very interesting perspectives actually for our audience over here. Durga, are you back, and can we get your views on the cloud security challenges?
Yeah, so I'm back. Hope I'm audible now. Sorry, I was disconnected for a moment and couldn't hear anything. Would you mind sharing which question what was the question related to?
Sure.
Sorry,
So
I
basically, we're
couldn't get
talking
that
about
earlier.
when we talk about DevSecOps, in the traditional world, it works perfectly fine. Possibly, if we have the right processes defined and we have the right tools available within the team. But when we look at our journey to the cloud, especially in the last 1.5 years since the pandemic, a lot of organizations have embraced the cloud big time and in a hurry. especially when there were apprehensions earlier in the past for these same organizations because of regulatory concerns or the risk related to cloud. Now, how do you see DevSecOps really coming into the cloud era, and what are some of the risks or challenges that you foresee for DevSecOps and shipping secure and better software when you are developing the cloud?
So development in the clouds, in the using cloud tools or developing cloud native applications. In my opinion, security is still kind of maturing. So we don't have complete view on what is the tooling like, or whether the tooling we have at this point in time. Well, there are so many tools in the marketplace for us to pay and use. How much are they able to deliver? How much are they reliable in terms of finding the vulnerabilities? Is still a question. So, in my opinion, is still a question, or maturity is required. So, in my opinion, we have to have some kind of a benchmarking or set of standard practices to be followed, like refer CIS benchmarks, or refer any kind of infrastructure as a code, wherein you bake in security requirements as code when you're putting a service, when you're consuming a service from the cloud, and adopt that methodology until we have some sort of a better maturity for cloud native applications.
I think you're on mute.
Dilip, looks like you're on mute. You're on mute.
And we keep it off because there's some construction work going on downstairs, and that's kind of making a lot of background noise for you guys. So, Mini, the next
No
question I
worries.
want to you specifically to start with, and this is we talk about these tools and processes, both requirements when you're looking at DevSecOps implementation in an organization. Uh, but again, tools and people and process all will come at a cost. How much do we invest? What is the balancing investment do you see for customers to look at? And how should they? Is it more tool heavy or more process heavy or more culture heavy? How do we really balance that out? What are your
Sure.
thoughts?
Sure, Dilip. So, like you rightly said, there are quite a few tools that are available. You have SaaS and DaaS tools that are available in the market. In fact, you have a mix of good open source tools also, which are well recognized by SANS, and you have a holding there or a reporting there. So, given so many tools, how do you kind of balance it out is extremely important. What we've seen in our experience, for example, across the entire life cycle, we've looked at or we've helped clients deploy a combination of tools. So, for example, while the development is happening, we've helped put in some open source tools, which again is not heavy on the pocket at all, but at the same time, it's kind of giving you early on your indicators. And once, at the later stages, you have a more evolved SaaS tool put in place and a DaaS tool put in place, which can help you assess what the vulnerabilities are. So we look at it from that perspective. Yes, you can do a complete life cycle based automation. In fact, you do have a lot of false positives also sometimes that these tools do throw, for which again you can have a layer of manual intervention, or there are additional tools available which can help in analyzing, and these are AI/ML based tools that can help in analyzing these false positives further and tell you, okay, what's really from a business context point of view, what really needs to be focused on. So there's no end to a tool. What we believe, like you rightly said, the balance is key. And in our experience, we put in a hybrid model where we look at open source tools, we look at some of these commercial tools, bundled with the intelligence that we've earned over our last experiences, to say how can we give insight to an organization more from a perspective of the business context and the key areas to focus on, rather than just look at all the vulnerabilities that these tools highlight. So maintaining that balance is extremely critical.
Thank you, Mini. Uh, on the other side, when we look at now on the tools aspect is covered over here. When we look at the other side of building secure aware culture in the organization, there are elements where you will definitely need buy-in, as Mini called out, as the top-down approach. And we all agree and kind of have been chiming in with regards to the perspective of the shift left approach by the developer community, and the IT team needs to be more briefed upon, and their buy-in are required. How do we go about building the security aware culture in the organization, and what is the benefit or the carrot that we can share with the IT team or the application development community team to support this initiative? How do you go about this, Rajan? For your perspective, what do you see is kind of that clicks for the teams, and they help support you in your journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've got a really good answer, especially from a remote perspective as well, because a lot of people have moved remotely. It's even more challenging because you don't have any FaceTime. I can't bump into a developer and say, "Hey, I'm Ashish. I'm the security person. Do you want to say hello and maybe go for, I don't know, coffee or something, and let's talk about how do you do security?" What I found, so we've been, at least in Australia, we've been working remotely for a little over 2 years now. It feels like 2 years because we finished 200 days of lockdown. But the one thing that worked for me, and I'm sure others can benefit from this as well, was when you go in an organization, there are always security champions, is that technically the word that I would use for these people who believe in their heart that they want to do the right thing, but they just don't have the guidance for it. And the reality is, all they're looking for is someone to tell them, "Hey, should I be using SSL over here?" I don't know. It feels like a weird thing. Like I need to create this certificate, like a public certificate or whatever. Do you think it's the right thing? And they are the ones who are asking a question in the team where you cannot be there 24/7, but they can be because they're part of the stand-ups. They're doing regular conversations with developers, and I think it's about weeding them out. And the way I approached it was the way during the whole remote thing, there's a lot of CTF that's going on, capture the flag events, and there were like a lot of development-led security events that were going on. And I was posting that on our comms channel, Slack, trying to figure out, hey, who would reach out? Because the bait, quote unquote, was that, hey, we're participating in a CTF as part of the PageUp. We're having a team. Why don't you guys kind of, whoever wants to join, feel free to join. You get to learn something as well. And what that ended up doing is, I think it started weeding out people who had that security inclination, but they were sure, who do I talk to about this? Because there's always people who want to do the right thing, but they don't know who the right people are. Like we're taught when you go out in a normal world, if you do see anything wrong, you can always reach out to the police. But no one teaches us this thing in an organization, especially if you don't have like a awareness training for security. No one knows who should I reach out to if I feel something is wrong. Like if I'm leaving passwords unencrypted or on a post-it note, who do I talk to about that? So for me, culture would be weeding out these security champions in the organization, and then hopefully training them and leveraging their, I guess, prime position inside a team to be driving a security initiative. I think we've kind of alluded to this earlier, that there are not many people who, I guess, have the luxury of having a large security team. And the way to grow yourself by scaling yourself, if I use a cloud analogy, that would be to kind of go down the path of having security champions and then training them and empowering them in a way that they feel, oh yeah, I should use SSL, or I should use only TLS 1.2, or I should do DevSecOps, or I know I can reach out to Ashish if I want to talk about security. So that is something that worked for me, and I hope it works for everyone else as well. Anyone wants to use that opportunity, I would totally not call out a credit for it. You can take all the credit.
Thanks, Raji. I think these were really practical insights that really helps all of us kind of, and that's the purpose kind of we get into these panel discussions and learn from each other. I think I got takeaways which I could add. Thank you. Mini, how do you go about recommending your customers with regards to helping this shift left and shift top culture to really keep in the organization and become like a well-oiled machine?
Sure. So Dilip, like I said, it has to come from the top. So frankly, we start off addressing that level first because it becomes much easier for the teams below. If the business teams are not pushing for that agile release, or if the business teams are not just putting that pressure. So of course, it starts from there. That's the culture change that we need to bring about. Then of course, right through the cycle, right, as developers build, they really need to be trained, and we do it by way of hackathons as well, where we get the developers to participate, show what is it, how one is able to actually break into their code. So it's a combination of hackers and developers coming together and showing how the codes can be broken, what can be done, and then how can they strengthen it. So it's rather than just a classroom-based training. Of course, we do have courses around those, but more a practical training where you develop, we break. Now you develop based on what we found, and then see if we can break it. It's a very very wonderful way of getting that ingrained within the system. So of course, training by fire is what we call it. So that's one way of kind of getting it done. The other bit is, if we may have all the tools in the place, we may have our consultants who are telling us, okay, there are issues here that needs to be addressed, but collaboration is key. And similar to what Ashish mentioned, right, it's collaboration with the SMRs, but it's also collaboration within the developer and operations community. Because if I've got a set of vulnerabilities that have been highlighted, how do I ensure that this is propagated across as well, so that everybody takes note and it's kind of taken care of if they were to hit upon a similar coding bad practice, right? So definitely learn by fire, get the top down to also bless it and of course be a part of it. And how do we ensure collaboration through the life cycle such that learnings of one team is being propagated across and not happening in isolation.
Thanks, Mani. I think that makes sense. The management support apart is not only the key item here; it also requires uh, educating as well as sharing learnings as we go about. So, if you're looking at the top kind of vulnerabilities coming out in the applications which are being developed, sharing out what those vulnerabilities, why are they risky, and how do we fix them at the base level, as well as if we find any kind of key attacks that are happening in the industry today, sharing those information with the team. Why is it important and what could go really wrong at your organization because our team not supporting those engagements? That would really bring them more awareness, make them more diligent, and make them feel included as part of your plan rather than being enforced upon with a policy.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you on that part. Durga, if I have you, would you be able to share some views about how you look at spreading the awareness and culture for DevSecOps at your organization?
Yeah, so we are doing multiple things. So similarly, we have security champions, a culture of security champions embedded. So there would be an embedded security champion in each pod, and they would be and empowering them to make decisions when it comes to say identifying when vulnerability is identified through the tooling we put in place. Say for not all vulnerabilities needs to be fixed, which is a priority according to their priorities, marry up their priorities. Second thing is false positives. So I mean, not all vulnerabilities are real vulnerabilities. We see good number of false positives coming in. So allow the security champion in the pod to mark this application as false positive through a check and balance mechanism and encourage. So like what Mini has mentioned, we do a combination of hackathons, red teaming, blue teaming exercises, and also we introduce something called kind of a belts mechanism. So somebody has to license to code. So somebody should have at least a belt, and then progress minimum level of belt to certify write the code, then enhance their coding skills through different level of belts, set the targets every year on improving their secure coding skills are already there. Now we need to embed them with secure coding skills. So these are the various cultural shifts we are coming up, and top down approach. So we also reach out to our senior executives asking for their support in embedding the secure coding into respective pods and service lines.
Thank you, Durga. I think that makes sense from the gamification perspective, as well as ensuring continual awareness as part of not only coding but also putting in security as part of the coding training itself. So it becomes like a combined approach and gives them continual learning at that respective point in time. Uh, the next question that I had was we are looking at a lot of these supply chain hacks today, where we do have a lot of risk to our organizations and our services, which are dependent on our supply chain ecosystem. That is our partners, our vendors who support our applications, or develop products for us. The same questions coming from my clients for me as a CISO for my organization because we provide similar services to them. How do you look at the supply chain hack related concerns and the DevSecOps requirement where you take your partners or your vendor ecosystem as part of your enterprise journey and help them get aligned to your DevSecOps journey requirements? Because every organization is different based on their risk profile, risk appetite. They would have certain processes, certain risk acceptances, and certain risk appetite. But at the same time, you have an organization to run, and you require your vendor ecosystem to follow those risk appetite and risk acceptance frameworks in order for them to provide software in a secure and acceptable code level as per your organization standards. So how do you guys today go about educating your vendor, taking them into partnership into such engagements, and ensuring that they are meeting those standards. Ashish, you want to take up?
Yeah, sure. I can go first. So I guess supply chain or third party has always been, I guess, sort of a challenge when you have to deal with not just the on-premise world, but nowadays we have a challenge of having APIs, microservices, and we have things that we don't want to do ourselves because someone has already made it. So we just leverage their API services for it. I think the first step for us, at least when we went down this path, was developing a standard that we wanted to kind of say, hey, this is our standard. So if you want to partner with us, this is, I guess, I'll probably take two halves. The first half is people who are working with us, who are third parties to PageUp. The way we've dealt with that is we've done a developer standard for, hey, this is our API, I guess, landscape. And if you want to interact with us, these are the minimum requirements we have to deal with if you want to work with it. Now, in saying that, it's not perfect because sometimes you have partners that are really big partners, and so sometimes you're smaller partners. Sometimes the other partner has a much bigger say because they're the ones who are bringing the money, and you're going, well, I want security as well. So there are, I guess, as Minnie had put in earlier, you need to find a balance somewhere between security and having giving them some leverage. So I guess over there, provide some flexibility. From the other side, which is us giving assurance to our customers and clients, I guess we serve companies in America, Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand as well. And what we kind of realized, an easier one, a quick win for anyone listening and want to kind of provide that security assurance has been compliance certificate. Now, whether it's your ISO 27001 or whether it's your SOC 2, depending on what kind of data you're holding, they might ask you for a SOC 2 versus like a ISO. But I feel like those two buckets kind of have kind of covered most of the third party supply chain. But what I want to call out, and I'll be curious to know what other people think about this as well. One of the risks that I find as a community that we not often talk about is the visibility of how much we are exposed to a third party. Like the Cambridge Analytica thing that came out of Facebook, that they were mining their data to kind of like do all these political events everywhere, and they only found out much later about it. You almost have to wonder, like, if a company like Facebook cannot have visibility of what's happening with their data, what is everyone else doing with the third party the data we're just giving away? So visibility for me, I feel, is something that we don't talk enough about. So I think I'm still working towards visibility. I feel I have visibility, but until I find that new service that I never heard of, I'll claim I know all the third-party services that we're using in PageUp. That's my take on this.
Thanks, Ashish. I think definitely the visibility is a key, and that's something that we all continue to evolve and try. Every time we say that we reach that level, we find something new at that point of time and say, okay, we still need to continue learning.
Yep.
Some interesting points which you mentioned, this coding baseline that you want to set up for the vendors based on the size and the capabilities, especially with the severity of the application which will be inducted in the organization and the services. Trust with the self-validation at your side, as well as looking at certifications from the partner on them following your coding practices.
Yep.
So, Dhruva, I'll just hand off to you and see how you look at this perspective and what kind of you would want to or recommend for your ecosystem partners to support you in this program.
Okay, so for our partners, what we are doing is we are bringing them into our game. So it's not that the hackathons are the security champion. What we follow for our perm employees are, whoever are supporting our applications, we are also folding them into the same kind of chain where we are encouraging them to pursue security builds around software coding, providing exposure to the tools the perms use along with our partners, so that it's equilibrium. We are striking balance, and any submissions and any code submissions coming our way are of equal security, irrespective of which developer is it a perm or a temporary resource. And other thing, we are also consciously working on our with our account managers on what kind of secure coding training happens within the partner organization, and can they embed what we are following as a practice in their organizations, limiting to this DevOps concept. This is what we are doing. And in terms of our information or infrastructure security, so some amount of, I mean, all the organizations are on cloud. So like what I alluded earlier, we are setting benchmarks or providing some IAC kind of standard prescriptions wherever there is cloud involved.
Thank you, Durga. I think that was really interesting. Since we are around the end of the session, have talk and have conversation right backstage, maybe and winding up. I'm going to quickly summarize some of the key elements that I at least captured and learned from this session with all of you, and then would hand over to individually each of you to help, given your last closing comments, and then you can conclude the session. So, at least from the perspective of the topic that we discussed today, the main item that we look at is while we focus on quality, security also has to be focused upon. It does require a shift left and a shift top approach, which does ensure that we have a buy-in from management as well as the developed community. The security of the culture has to seep in the organization. It is very important that people understand why they are doing it rather than they are being enforced to do it. That is where you need to work with them, collaborate with them, find the best approach that really works for your organization by training them, gamifications, as well as explaining them and giving them advisories on the various control and requirements and why they're critical. Finally, looking at when you look at cloud DevSecOps, while it is in developing stage, it does require to continue using the foundational security control elements and tuning it up to a certain extent to meet the cloud requirements. Investments definitely are involved in such areas, but they have to be balanced. There are open source tools also available which support the requirements, and there are partners globally available, including EY, where they provide support in this activities for security briefing with regards to putting the culture as well as the processes in place. And finally, when you look at the overall ecosystem at an organization, it is important that we also consider our third party and ecosystem and vendors as part of our journey and bring them as part of our team and take them with us with the same way how we take our developer community. With this, I'm going to hand over to Minnie and let her give her closing remarks. Then we'll go to Ashish and finally Durga, and then hand over to Anand back again.
Thanks, Dilip. I think you very well summarized. Frankly, it's all of it put together, and of course, just one more point to add that let's also ensure that we have a frame in place so that we understand what are my quality gates, what are my security assessment gates within the whole life cycle. We should not over-engineer it. At the same time, we shouldn't fall flat as well. So let's have that frame well built up. In addition to, of course, all that Dilip talked about.
Thank you, Minnie. Ashish?
I was going to say that's definitely a great summary, man. I think you should definitely do this professionally as well. You summarized most of the points as well, so that was really good. I think the only thing I would add, and if people are kind of going about this and going, "Oh, DevSecOps I should do this DevSecOps." One thing that I've been talking about quite publicly, and I would love if anyone has an opinion to share it as well. I feel like, you know how we talk about traditionally on-premise static code analysis, dynamic code analysis? I feel static code analysis itself, if it continues the way it is, it's going to die. That's my opinion, and I've been very vocal about it, because in the cloud world, I feel it's something where people want to release features every 2 minutes. Static code analysis doesn't work like that. At least it hasn't evolved into technology that hasn't. So for people who are listening to this and want to do a takeaway, definitely check out what can be done in static code analysis to maybe change it. But apart from that, everything that Dilip summarized, this on the money, man, on the money.
Thank you, Ashish. Appreciate it. Durga, can you please share your closing remarks as to your...
Yeah, so I think you did the best summary of what all we discussed, what all points we brought up, Dilip. That was a great summary. And just to conclude, so for getting better at DevSecOps, any organization requires top-down approach. First thing is top-down approach buy-in from the management. Second thing is the culture shift. So how do we empower developers to adopt security instead of saying security is not my area or my piece of cake? So I think that's key shift that needs to be brought in across any organization which wants to go DevOps way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Durga. I think we are just around 10 seconds away, and Anand, I've been true to my time, so I hand it off back to you. And thank you everybody on the panel for this wonderful session. Really learned a lot with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Thank you so
much.
everyone.
much, everyone.
For your closing
Very
remarks.
well
I
Thank you.
thank
done.
you
Great session.
for beautifully
Thank
summarizing it.
you.
I like to thank each one of you for helping us, give this window into the world of DevSecOps. The session was very insightful and very educative, also very gripping at the same time. Thank you for your time again.